Hello everyone, Ethan here, and welcome back to another lecture. Now, before I start this lecture and before I start teaching, I thought I would make two announcements about the channel really quick, just to update all of you. So the first is that the Discord is now public, this community Discord. I talked about that in a few other videos, I believe. I put it also in the description that the community Discord would eventually roll out, become public, and I'm happy to announce that it is. You can check the link in the description if you'd like to go to the Discord. It's a discussion-based server focused on socionics and other disciplines, and also a place to socialize. So if any of you are interested in that, I would highly recommend joining. And it won't just be in this description link, obviously. I'll post a link in all of the other descriptions to my videos, and then all the future ones as well, so that all of you can join the Discord whenever you would like, if you would like to do so. The other announcement that I have to make is that the intro series is pretty much done. I figured the last lecture in the intro series was going to be about a concept called information metabolism. That's sort of a precursor to socionics. And I thought, well, that concept is so misunderstood and so little known in the socionics community that I figured I would split it up into 4 parts and teach it comprehensively. So the intro series, basically what I'm trying to say is that the intro series is done. All of the context that we need for our exploration of socionics is contained in the intro series, and now we are going to begin an independent series that focuses on information metabolism, and there will be 4 videos to cover that, like I said. So let's begin. Today's lecture is called Information and Entropy, and it is the first part of the information metabolism series. And today I thought I would talk about some notions of information and how they relate to entropy before we start talking about information metabolism. So let's begin. In the 1960s, a Polish psychiatrist named Antoni Kropinski created his theory of information metabolism, which on the surface, just a very basic summary, is a theory of how biological organisms relate to the environments around them through information processing. And in this theory, he made a distinction between 2 types of metabolisms in living organisms, one being energy metabolism and the other being information metabolism. Now, energy metabolism, I'm sure, is a fairly common notion. It's tantamount in the biological sciences, and it is basically this process by which living cells destroy other molecules in the process called catabolism, and then create new molecules, anabolism, in order to create complex structures like proteins, lipids, carbohydrates, etc. Everything you'd learn in a biology class. And the destruction of some molecules creates the energy that's needed to create other molecules, which is why it's called energy metabolism. However, Kropinski also made the distinction of information metabolism, and that's a little bit more of a little-known notion that I'm going to be talking about in this video and the successive videos. However, before we can talk about information metabolism, we need to talk about what information is by itself. As I'm sure you all know, this notion of information, this definition, this word information, is thrown around all the time by scientists, engineers, data scientists, philosophers, without any real clear and precise definition of what it means. What does information mean? What is the one definition? Well, I'm here to tell you that there is no one definition. However, there are 3 major definitions that have been used in the sciences over the years that I'm going to highlight here in this lecture, and then illustrate how they can all be pieced together to aid our exploration of information metabolism. So, let's begin. So, the first definition of information that I'm going to be talking about is Shannon's definition of information. Now, Claude Shannon was a scientist in the early 1900s, and he came up with a mathematical definition of information that's based on the amount of uncertainty in a data source and its output. So I'm going to try to illustrate this concept as best as possible, and some of the concepts in this information metabolism series will be a little bit technical, but I'm going to do my best to go through them step by step and really illustrate them so that nobody misses out on any of these concepts. So Claude Shannon said that any data source can be conceptualized as a random variable x. Now, if the variable x assumes a value a1 with a 100% probability of doing so, then that data source is said to generate no information, because it's 100% predictable what value will come out of the data source. However, if the data source variable x has outputs a1, a2, and a3 at a 33% chance each, then the information entropy for that data source is considered positive. More generally, the more uncertainty the value generates and the lower percentage is strewn across the values, then the more the appearance of a specific value is said to generate information, or how much information is contained in the message. Now, Shannon's definition of information is purely mathematical. For example, it doesn't cover the semantic notion of information, but it still finds its way around mind-related disciplines like neuroscience and other, again, mind-related disciplines. The semantic definition of information actually concerns the meaning of the information, and this is what is referred to more commonly by philosophers and people in everyday life. This is their common notion of information, is semantic information, and it's related to the understanding of a language and how its meaning can be interpreted by the reader. For example, a data scientist may use Shannon's system of information to calculate how much information a foreign piece of text contains within it, but unless we understand the language that the foreign text is written in, nobody will understand the meaning of the message. So with that said, it's clear that most messages contain both Shannon information and semantic information. What I mean by that is some messages can contain a lot of uncertainty as well as a lot of semantic meaning, as well as vice versa. For example, you could have a message that has a lot of Shannon information and a lot of uncertainty, but which really doesn't make sense when interpreted semantically. So the definitions of both can crisscross back and forth with one another. An important notion that we can explore with Shannon's information and generalize to other fields is this notion of entropy. Now, entropy, Ludwig Boltzmann studied entropy when he studied statistical mechanics, a theory in physics. Basically, entropy is the tendency of a system to gain more disorder over time, as mandated by the second law of thermodynamics. Now, Boltzmann was studying entropy in the early 1900s as well, and he came up with a theory that was able to describe all of the microscopic configurations, particles, etc., of a thermodynamic system when set by some macroscopic parameters, like pressure, volume, temperature, etc. And so he was able to calculate the entropy in any given thermodynamic system. Now, what they found out later was that the equation for Boltzmann's entropy actually lined up extremely well with Shannon's definition of the informational content in certain messages. And so the notion of entropy in physics was proven to be connected very well to this notion of information in communications technology. Now, with all of those three definitions of information described, how can we connect all of those together to form a meaningful theory of information, and what does that tell us about information metabolism? So, now that we've gone over the three different definitions of information, Shannon's definition, which is purely quantitative, the semantic definition, which concerns the meaning of the message, and Boltzmann's entropy, which is the measure of disorder in a given system, before we talk about the unification, let's talk a little bit more about entropy. So, according to the second law of thermodynamics, an isolated system possesses the tendency to increase entropy, or have a net gain of entropy over time. So, for example, if I left this room just the way that it was, over a long period of time, dust would creep in, bugs and vermin would settle, and mold would grow on the ceiling. Obviously, the room's disorder would increase over time, just as every other isolated system does. So how is it possible that a living organism can decrease the entropy of its surroundings? Obviously, I wrote on this whiteboard, I created more order on this whiteboard instead of creating more disorder. I organized this lecture, that's an example of order. So how is the second law of thermodynamics not being violated from those actions? Well, a physicist named Leon Brillouin unified these three notions of information to produce a theory of how organisms can combat entropy to reduce entropy in their surroundings. So Brillouin said basically that information, or knowledge of the system, can be used to reduce the entropy of an organism and its immediate surroundings. He also made a note that whenever an organism does this, he must also necessarily create a disorder in the outside environment as a result of his actions. So, for example, me as a living system, I can use information and knowledge of the system around me to create order in front of me and order around me in my immediate surroundings. But in order to do so, I must expend energy and create disorder in the wider environment. And so we could give a very abstract example of this with how humans are destroying the environment. For example, humans are taking knowledge of the world around them and decreasing the entropy and creating order in their immediate surroundings, while at the same time creating disorder in the environment as a result of bad policy. And so that can be seen as an example of Brillouin's unification. And his was the first theory to be considered a unification of both information theory and the two notions of information with the theory of thermodynamics in physics. So this is what Kopinski used to formulate his theory and provide the foundation of information metabolism. He believed that this entropy management, this back and forth between nature, living systems, and entropy was tantamount to an organism's survival. For example, the reduction of uncertainty being powerful in the survival of an organism. For example, orienting oneself in a new environment, avoiding predators, and finding nourishment sources in a new environment involves reducing the entropy, gaining knowledge about a system, and creating results and reducing the entropy in the organism and its immediate environment. And so he created this principle that living systems increase the negative entropy, in other words, decrease the entropy of themselves and their surroundings, while non-living systems continuously gain entropy because they are unable to manage the entropy in their surroundings. And so, because of this, Kopinski formulated his biological laws to go along with this, but that is something that will be covered in the next lecture. So, to summarize what I've talked about here, we talked about the distinctions between energy metabolism and information metabolism, the three different types of information, and how those three types can be unified together to give us a good picture of how an organism interacts with its environment through the theory of information processing. The next lecture will be about Kopinski's biological laws, and then the other two lectures will be about other concepts in information metabolism. So, hopefully you learned something. Hopefully this wasn't too complicated. If anything in the video confused you, please don't feel afraid to post a comment down below. I'll answer any questions that anybody has. I know I probably could have done a better job explaining the Shannon information and the thermodynamics section, but hopefully all of you got the main gist of the lecture. So drop a like on the video, subscribe if you're interested in more of these lectures, and we'll continue to explore socionics as we go forward. So I will see you all in the next lecture.